You are listening to episode 226 of Colette and Matt have entered the chat. It's a weekly conversation about video games, video game culture, video game journalism, video game technology, communities, internet stuff. I've been underwater. I've been researching how to protect children from AI for the last 2 weeks.
I
just gave a talk at my kid's school, and now I'm done with that, and I'm ready to talk about video games with my good friend Colette Bennett. Hello, I'm tired. Forgive me if I'm tired on this episode.
Look, I'm tired after I talk about AI for 2 seconds, so I can completely understand.
Fair enough.
After giving a speech and thinking about how to protect your children, which just the thought of exhausts me, even though I do not have children.
I don't recommend bringing children into this AI world if you can help
I thought you were just going to say into this world, and I was like, me either.
All of it. I don't have my sound effect to say. I don't have Agent Scully to say we are not alone. But as you can see if you're watching the video version, and soon you are about to hear that we are not alone. We have a very special guest with us. It is Matt Leone, who is a veteran games journalist. 13 years at Polygon, 10 years at OneUp.com. Perhaps you remember. And he is known for doing these unbelievable oral histories of our favorite franchises in video games, and he has a new venture which is called Design Room. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Please welcome Matt Leone to the podcast. Hello, Matt. 2 Matts.
Oh boy,
way too many. How are you?
Awesome. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out, were you talking to parents about AI or the kids directly? Because I kind of think one of those is funnier than the others.
Okay. I've done a little bit of this in our school district, and it's mostly for parents. But then the parents come up to me after, and they're like, "Can you do this for the kids? Can you tell my kids about this?" And I'm like, "Yes." I'm just waiting for the PTA to set up the next one. So we'll see.
But you see, for the kids, it's less of the pitfalls, and it's more of oh, I can do that now. I need to send me the link.
Yeah. So do you have kids who are of school age or no?
Yes, but we haven't really gotten to AI stuff yet.
Totally. Yeah.
Lucky you.
We're here to talk about Matt's work and career here, but I'll just say the moral of the story that has come out of the collective discussion, which I'm really happy with, is the more that parents and teachers and kids just talk about it, the less mysterious and the less hey, are kids using AI to cheat? Let me run it through a filter to see. And it's kids are cheating and teachers are detecting the cheating, but then the data is showing, as researchers look at this, so if teachers just use it in the classroom and show kids what's good and what's bad, all that shit just kind of goes to the back and they can just start learning again. And that's cool.
Hopeful.
That's good. Hopeful. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really hopeful. I would have thought that everyone would be using it to cheat, to be honest.
They are. Yeah, I don't want to go all the way into it, but...
Right, TLDR.
Yes, TLDR. Just like anything, sex, drugs, conversations are better than pretending it doesn't exist and hoping that it will go away, obviously.
I agree.
Matt Leone is here. We're here to talk about video games and your work. Why don't you give our listeners who are not familiar a little bit of your background, your backstory?
Oh man, I feel like you already did that. I worked at OneUp for a while. I worked at Polygon for a while, and now I'm doing a new thing that's kind of similar to that. So I don't know, how far you want to go. You want to go to early days? I made a print fanzine in my parents' house.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Was it about games or was it about something else?
Yeah, there were multiple ones. There was one called Game News that was printed on my grandparents' printer. There was one called Event Gaming, which was somehow I thought about arcade games. It was all about arcade games, and it was okay, that's more of an event, so we'll call it that.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway,
were you bringing these to right? And were you bringing them to conventions
some of them are long
and stuff?
Gone, but
okay.
Oh no!
What a good memory, though.
These were 10 copies printed of each, sent out to a few friends or whatever.
I was going to say, okay, so classmates and friends then, yeah.
I love go ahead, Matt.
No, there was I don't know if you remember, there in EGM2 and Tips and Tricks and some of those magazines back then, they sometimes like would promote little things like that. So that was like a way of like getting your name in those magazines. So it was in a few of those.
Yeah. Great.
Wow, that's so awesome. I love that because I feel like for so many people who have loved games, they've loved games for a very, very, very long time. And I like hearing people's stories, especially of like where that click was in the very beginning. You know,
Yeah,
sounds like yours came at a very young age.
I hope no one actually finds them because they're horrible, but you know, anything from
Doesn't
30
matter.
years ago would be.
We'll use AI to dig out Matt's first zines, you know.
Well,
Yes.
so this is a perfect place for me to transition because obviously, you know, I was going to ask what drew you into games journalism in the first place, but obviously you had a very early interest. So at what point in your life were you like, oh, I could maybe write about this?
Yeah, I mean, it was right around that time. I don't know how old, maybe 10 or 11 or something like that. And, you know, all I did at that point was play games and read magazines about games. And, you know, in retrospect, a lot of that stuff is kind of tacky and embarrassing. But at the time, it was amazing. It was like looking into the future and like seeing these things that we're going to get to play in 6 months or whatever. So, yeah, I mean, I was a fan of like any video game magazine I could find. I was a fan of, and I was like, well, let me see if I could do some version of that, and you know, just try.
Did the internet play a big role? Like, did you feel like that was like would allow you into that space, or were you interested in like trying to see if you could enter into magazines first?
Well, so it was kind of like before the internet really existed. Like,
okay,
I mean, not literally existed, but like if you think like I remember the first time I ever saw like video game content from the internet, I believe was when Sega announced Knights for the Saturn, because I have a distinct memory of like seeing a trailer of that online and thinking like, this is like a weird delivery mechanism. So like that, I can use that to kind of like date myself back. And I think I was making these fanzines before that happened. So it would have been, it's not really like the internet was an option at that point. But then it was soon after. So like I mentioned, like Event Gaming, that fanzine, that actually turned into a website called Event Gaming at one point. And then I was doing like fan sites for a short period of time. And then that got me an internship at gamers.com because they were like, no one else is covering arcade games. Do you want to cover arcade games? So then I did that for a little while. And then, you know, that kind of turned into some other stuff. So it kind of just happened naturally, but it wasn't like the internet was a specific reason why, but I mean, it's the way everything is done now. So.
And if you were anything like me when I got into games writing, you weren't like, oh, this is going to be a career. You were like, this is a thing I love and I really want to write about it. But you probably never would have dreamed that it could be like, I'm going to do this for a living.
Well, at the time, it was like there were game magazines and it just kind of felt like those would be around forever. And so you looked at that and you're like, okay, that might be a job I could get and do. And I don't know. It wasn't like I was making the fanzine as a way to try to get that job specifically. But I did always want that job. That like seemed like something I wanted to do when I was a kid. And
yeah.
So cool. Let's talk about the games themselves. What were the games that sparked your imagination at this time? You mentioned arcade games, but what was the home console that, if any, or was it PC? What were you dabbling in at that time? 10 years old?
Not as much on PC. Pretty much any console I would play, any arcade game I would play. I played a lot of like Street Fighter, a lot of like Neo Geo arcade games. Gauntlet was big. Joust was big. But yeah, like I didn't have a Genesis right away. I had Super Nintendo, original Nintendo. I was a little bit after Atari, just based on my age. But yeah, like Super Nintendo was probably like that peak of like what they always talk about, like that age range when, you know, things mean the most to you or whatever.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. Yeah. Same for me. All right. So gamers.com, like I don't remember that specifically. Was that a paid job? Like what was your first like real job or internship in this world?
So yeah, gamers.com was a paid, I guess it doesn't, I don't know if technically it was an internship or not. It was a website. So you remember, Thresh, Dennis Fong, the guy who won a bunch of money doing like Quake tournaments back in the days. And he was famous for getting like
him forever.
That sounds cool.
He he famously had like I think it was a Ferrari that was he won in a tournament and he like put that in the lobby of this company he started. Basically, this was a media website that he started off of like the back of being like kind of having gained
really
some fame from that.
Okay.
So he got some like investment or whatever, and started trying to put together like a website to, a similar to like an IGN or something like that.
Okay. Yeah.
And so then they were just hiring a bunch of people. They hired a bunch of people from some of like the Ziff Davis magazines and some other places. And I got in because they were hiring for like an arcade section. And like there was a lot of money being thrown at this thing, in that they had like 4 people working on the arcade section just to kind of like build out the database of like, we don't put together summaries for all these games and stuff like that.
Okay.
And it wasn't really like glamorous work or anything, but it was great from my perspective. But yeah, this was it was like basically using like .com money to fund an editorial website. Totally. And so they had like, catered dinners and movies playing in the offices and stuff like that. I only ever went to the offices one time. So I got like a glimpse of this, but I was mostly just doing this from college, like part-time. And so that was fun. But it didn't last very long, as you probably would expect. And then, from there, I ended up later in college. I think it was, it would have been after that. I did an internship with Official Xbox Magazine during the summer one year. That was in their office for just 3 or 4 months. So that was fun. And then that kind of led into like the 1UP job. And so kind of everything leads to the next.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's great. This is wonderful. There's so much here about you that I didn't know. And I love hearing the history, especially remembering things that I had forgotten completely about.
Oh, yeah. There's tons.
So what were, if you don't mind, and I know it was a bit of time, but what were your years at 1UP like? Do you have any really fond memories of experiences there that like you look back on now?
Yeah. 1UP was great. I think the thing that was probably most notable about it to me in retrospect was like, that was my first real job, like full-time job in an office in my 20s, in a city, which I had grown up in the suburbs. So like all that was different, and felt very kind of grown up relative to what I'd been doing before. Even though
this was all in SF. Did you grow up in California and then move to SF?
Yeah, I grew up in the LA area.
Okay.
And then moved up San Francisco for the job.
Okay.
Downtown San Francisco. There's the office appears in the Sonic the Hedgehog movie briefly, if you're looking quickly.
Love.
Yeah. But yeah, it was great. The people were really good. We got to do interesting stuff. I think, it was. I got there through 1UP, but they also had like all the magazines going initially, and then those kind of died off as 1UP got a little bigger, and then it all kind of died off in the end. But it was interesting, like seeing the dynamics change. Like every year was different, and like magazines would go, and people would go, and people would join, and like it was never like stable. It was always kind of bumpy, but it was fun, and I would recommend it to anybody.
That's awesome. And then obviously when that was winding down, did it dovetail perfectly into you finding Polygon, or like how did that transition happen?
Pretty much, yeah. So 1UP got sold to Hearst at one point. So it was Ziff Davis, and it sold to Hearst.
I didn't know that.
And then
I didn't know that.
So Hearst owned UGO at the time. Terrible website, but some good people there. And they bought 1UP, and then they tried to kind of like merge those two, and it it never really worked that well. But they tried.
I'm curious now. Was 1UP independent and then became part of Ziff, or was it created by Ziff?
It started at Ziff. Yeah,
I see.
Ziff.
Okay.
I
didn't realize that.
They had like the Ziff Davis Games group was like those different magazines, and they're like, well, we should have a website. And they actually tried a couple of different things, and I'm not even sure I would remember all the details of that history, but they had some other stuff before 1UP too. So anyway, so I what was I saying? I did the
or sorry, like as 1UP was was it Okay. Was it winding down, or did you jump ship?
It got bought by Hearst, and then and then they got bought by IGN, which I think just kind of, I don't know if they were being nice or they wanted to get rid of their limited competition or exactly what the intent was there, but that didn't work out that well either. So they ended up shutting it down. I got laid off shortly before that, but the timing worked out perfectly because I was like right as Polygon was starting up. So like, I think I was out of work for like a week, and it just kind of rolled into the next.
Nice.
It was convenient. So then, I was there longer than I was at 1UP, which I wouldn't really have expected.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Wow.
Man, I mean, you've never had a real job. All right. You went right from being 10 years old, printing up your own zines, right into the industry, which is all like so many people, work wait tables or work retail. It's awesome.
In short, you have quite literally lived the dream, as
you're living the
gamers
dream.
have joked, which is the shit.
Well, I appreciate. I'm trying to figure out some of that right now, so we'll see how it goes.
Of course. I'm so in your time with these media organizations, I hesitate to call them traditional, but they feel traditional now compared to where we are today, what you're doing today. So that's a weird spectrum. But what were some of your like, oh my God, I am playing this game before it's out, or oh my God, I have access to this amazing person? What were some of those moments when you're starting to realize that you have access to this world in ways that you did not have before?
Yeah, that was a big thing with the magazine. So like when One Up started up, like it didn't have the same like kind of cachet or kind of brand that it did towards the end. So like looking back now, a lot of people would say like, oh yeah, that was like, some people would even mention like One Up before EGM or something like that nowadays. But at the time, EGM or Computer Gaming World or some of the other magazines they had like a much higher kind of brand loyalty and all that kind of stuff. So they got bigger exclusive, and like print in general back then got all that stuff too. So
yeah,
definitely.
Totally.
As One Up, like our big thing was kind of like, let's piggyback off these magazines and like do stuff with them so that like we can get some of what they're doing. And as time went on, like the higher ups in our department were like, yeah, we should do that. And so they like kind of forced people to do that even if they didn't want to. And so that was kind of how we got like access to things that we wouldn't have probably gotten otherwise. Like I remember Street Fighter 4 was a big one. We got to like see that before it had been announced and that kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think I spent a lot of that time working on previews. So like it was definitely fun, like seeing stuff before it had been announced and seeing, interviewing everybody and all that. I feel like that stuff over time has become less interesting, both to me and just like in the industry in general. It's like people aren't quite as interested in kind of that stuff as much as they are just like give me the trailer and tell me when it's coming out and that kind of thing.
Yeah, because the way people get information about upcoming games has changed, and also there's a billion games coming out every day. So like,
yeah,
I don't need to be waiting with bated breath for the new Halo because I got 600 other games to already play in my Steam library.
Well, I think it's the overwhelm too, which we've talked about on this show extensively. Like, as a kid or as a young adult, like I would be so excited about one game that was coming out that I was going to play for 4 months after it came out. And, we can't do, not say we can't, I can still be excited for a game, but it's just the landscape is so overwhelming. So
yeah, we used to always get like PR people would send us like, oh, can you post an update on like this new weapon we're announcing for this game, and like these little tiny like piecemeal details, and like they would get like upset when we wouldn't. It's like, no, it's not really a story.
Right.
But like sometimes we would back then too, because like that was all there was. Like, sometimes the story could just be like, here are some new screenshots of a game. And like, no one would care about that now. But back then it could be a big deal.
Back then they did a lot.
You would negotiate with PR for months over getting like 2 screenshots of a new game to be in the magazine and stuff like that. Like that stuff ate up a ton of time and like was viewed as like very important back then. So it's just, things change.
Who were we? Was it Luke Plunkett we were just talking to? Who was like, when on a slow day, I'd post pictures of cake to Kotaku, and that would drive traffic. Yeah. And I was like, man, I miss those days.
I know, I miss those days too.
Bullshitting
They were so
on your
wholesome.
one blog post of the day. Yeah.
They were wholesome and fun.
So, speaking of wholesome and fun, when do these epic oral histories start to take shape in your work? Is this your idea? Is this an editor wanting it? Is it, you meeting someone and it turns into something? Is it organic? How did that form?
Yeah. No, it was my idea. It was very much a gradual thing. Like towards the end of the time at One Up, I started doing more like human interest type stories or, interview based stories about games or game history and stuff like that. And then that just that's actually kind of what got me the job at Polygon. Was I had been doing more of that kind of stuff, and that's what they wanted to do more of. So at Polygon, my job was basically doing features the entire time I was there. Like sometimes it was a little more one thing or a little more something else, but it was all focused on like features about people who make games. And so the oral history specifically was just like an extension of that. It was just like, okay, if we structure this a little differently and, do a lot of quotes one after another instead of having it written out, it could look a little different. The first one I did was Street Fighter 2. I think that was like 2013 or 2014. And yeah, like I think a big part of the idea there was just like I wanted to try a different format. I liked the idea of telling a story that people had heard kind of the basic details of, but in like more detail and with more personality. And I thought you could get a lot more out of it by doing it that way. It took a lot more time and cost a lot more money to do that, but that was kind of what was interesting. So we went for it. And then, that just kind of, once that first one came out and did very well. So then once that came out, like I did a Final Fantasy VII one a few years later. And then we started doing a lot more like freelance ones, and I would do some smaller things. And eventually the Street Fighter project turned into this like big whole series, and both of those turned into books and all this other stuff. So it was kind of a fun path, but it was mostly just because I wanted to, and we had the money. So we wanted to try it out.
Yeah.
So awesome. Oh God, I miss this time period of journalism so much, when it was it was just a good idea. Let's do it.
We're doing
You're
it.
Right.
We're bringing it back. We'll talk about that in a moment with Matt.
Yes, it's true.
Yeah.
So let's move to design room. So obviously, the idea of design room was to kind of carry this on and also move towards a new model of journalism, since now we're existing in this in shitified hellscape of what has happened to video games. So we talked with Luke Plunkett at length about the model, and then we saw the announcement about design room, and we were really excited to see what you were doing. So a couple of questions. First one is why Shadow of the Colossus first, and tell us about the kind of start to finish process for you of creating this oral history, which is rich and amazing, and I loved, because just as a side note, for me, Shadow of the Colossus at that time was one of the most mysterious games I had ever played. And I remember that I would just pore over game magazines looking for information about it, because it was so different from things that I grew up playing or even played in my 20s. It was the kind of game that I desperately wanted more information on. And I feel like that's exactly what your oral history gave.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I didn't really go into this expecting that to be the first story. Like the first few months I was planning it, I had probably like 4 or 5 different games that I had thought of as like, maybe this could be the first one to start with. And that was on the list, but it wasn't even at the top of the list. And, I think it's tricky when you're doing these stories, because you have to have like a certain level of access and buy-in from people to make them work. Right. So sometimes I'll start in on something and, I'll just realize partway in, like maybe I'll spend a month on it and realize, oh, this isn't really going to turn into what I wanted it to be. And so you turn that into something smaller, or maybe you use it, maybe you hang on to it until
because
later,
because a key person from the game's history is not accessible or doesn't want to talk about it. Is that what you're getting at, or is it something else?
Yeah, there's all kinds of like gaps you could run into. So like often it'll be, like you say, one person or multiple people who don't want to or can't for whatever reason. Right, sure. A lot of times if people are still employed by the same company, they may be blocked by their PR department. If they're not employed by another company, they may not be allowed to speak about a different company's games. Like there's all kinds of weird politics and rules that kind of go into this stuff. Sometimes you just have to wait until people leave jobs before they can talk about stuff. Sure. So yeah, it's kind of tricky. And yeah, I mean, I think on any story or the bigger ones that I like to do, like I want to have at least 5 people talking, probably more like 10 or more if I can. And so, it depends on who's available. And yeah, like some stories you might go down the road a little bit and see like, oh, okay, we can talk to these people, but like maybe they aren't in the department that was like what the real story was about. Like if it's like if you're doing a story on Doom, you wouldn't want to talk to just like the people in marketing. You'd want to talk about people who actually worked on the tech. And, I like to talk to everybody, but there's certain things that like the story just will be very empty if you don't have. So yeah, like the Shadow Colossus just kind of worked out. It turned out that the anniversary, like the 20th anniversary of the game, was a pretty good time. Like I could see that a few months out, like that's gonna kind of sync up with when I want this to launch. So I did that, and it kind of worked out for that. And sometimes having an anniversary can like help convince people to talk to. I don't know if it did or not in this case, but sometimes it can. So yeah, it was really just kind of pulling on the threads and seeing what worked. And once I got like a few of the main people on board, then I kind of knew that the rest of it was going to fall into place, and just kind of worked out.
One question that Matt had put in our doc when we were brainstorming was, how did you get to talk to so many of the key people? And I feel like hearing your story and your background, where you started and your path, that's kind of answering a little bit of that for me at least. But I'd like to hear more about how difficult it was to get these folks to work with you.
And also for this particular game, everyone is Japanese,
right?
Mostly, right? Or no?
Well, not other people I interviewed. I interviewed a lot of people who are in different offices and departments. All right. So, but yeah, like the core development team was Japanese. Yeah.
Okay.
So
But you spoke to them as well, and is this just through translators, or how did that? Come through? Yeah,
there's interpreters that I'll work with for that kind of thing, and that all adds to like the time and expense and all that kind of stuff that goes into it. So yeah, it's not. I mean, I don't know. I think partly it's just once I saw there were going to be enough people available, then I kind of went for it. But it's not that hard to get people to talk about this stuff. Like some people can't, or they don't want to. Like sometimes that comes up, and there are other stories that I've kind of got on the back burner now that I want to get back to because people can't for whatever reason or don't want to. But like, I don't know. I don't think it's that hard. It just takes time. And, you got to have the right, attitude, spirit, whatever, and just kind of keep working at it.
If you put your blood, sweat, and tears into anything, a piece of art that had a cultural impact, and there's so much discussion and fandom and whatever, but then somebody finally comes to you and is like, hey, well, how did that actually come together? I'd be like, yes, I would like to tell you all the details. And I don't have to tell you this, Matt, but like you are filling in the gaps of history that are overlooked by news headlines and web forum. Like you are documenting what theoretically went down before. And I don't mean to be morbid, but like, I'm sure you've run into situations where it's like, hey, I would love to hear this story, but the person is no longer with us, and that story is lost forever, or buried in a hard drive that we can no longer access, whatever. So I don't know. I don't know if there's a question there, but
no, I think it really depends on the story you're trying to tell. Like there are some stories that are more sensitive for various reasons. Maybe there's something political in it, or something happened behind the scenes that people don't want to talk about. But like something like Shadow of the Colossus, that doesn't really have an issue with, because it's a game that everyone seems to love, and that makes it a little easier. I think in some ways it's a little safer bet for me to do for like the first story, just because it's not as risky expecting a whole bunch of people to talk. You can kind of expect more people will want to talk on a game like that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that does make sense, actually. So I'm also curious, because it's such a deep dive story, and I'm sure this varies with the different ones you've done. What kind of time spent from like start to finish? Like for instance, on Shadow of the Colossus, like how long does it take to put something like that together?
Yeah, I mean, it's never just like I'm working on one thing at a time and nothing else. Like I was literally building the website, and I was working with freelancers. Like I have stuff planned now that's not coming out for like 6 months. So like there's all this stuff that I'm doing that's kind of like planning for the future. And that all adds to the time. So yeah, I don't know exactly, probably a few months from start to finish on that story. Yeah. But a lot of that is kind of, making sure people are available, making sure interpreters can get the word to people with enough time to like make sure they want to do it. And like, so like the main interview we did for this story was with like the director and producer of the game, essentially, Fumio Ueda and Kenji Kaito. And so like setting that one up took some time, because like you have to get interpreters to connect with like their PR, to connect with, to get them together, like on the same call at the same time. And like all that kind of stuff definitely took time. And that was like the main kind of the starting point. Like once we got that, or once we knew that was happening, at least, then I could kind of go around and talk to everybody else and kind of get them to fill in all those gaps. So stuff like that, you want to usually plan out pretty early.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. There are some stories that could happen a lot faster. It depends on how you're doing it. Sometimes if you wanted to like literally just do a story with like, it's a round table where you talk to 6 people at the same time on the same call. Usually I don't think those have quite the same flow to them in terms of like editing and that kind of stuff. But it's a lot easier on the workflow.
It's faster, yeah, for
side.
sure.
So
I'm like, I want to do that one. Yeah, it's so much faster.
I could do one of those, transcribe it, and get it up in like a day or two. So
wow.
Getting 6 people together sometimes can be tricky. It depends. Maybe PR can help you with that kind of thing. Maybe people don't know each other anymore, and you have to like track them all down separately. So like every story is a little different, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. I have two things to say about Shadow of the Colossus, or one comment and one question about the history itself. Number one, I'm angry at Shadow of the Colossus because it is my jam. It is a game that I would have wanted to play. I've never owned a PlayStation, and then they remade the game, which looks awesome, and it continues to be exclusive to PlayStation, despite Sony putting all their freaking big fat games on PC. So what I'm saying here and now is, Sony, you cowards, put the Shadow of Colossus remake on PC so I can play it. That's number one.
Matt is not going to go complain to the people for you.
And if you can set that up for me, Matt, that would be great.
God.
Okay. I'm just trying to remember, like, was that like right in that era before they started putting all their stuff on PC? So maybe it was just like, not part of that workflow. It missed the window,
but like, come on.
Yeah.
Except for Final Fantasy VII, because I think Final Fantasy VII was so big that it merited it. But other than that,
but then it came eventually.
Oh, right. That's right.
But they did the deal with Sony PlayStation, and then a year later it came to PC.
Exclusivity or something.
Window. Okay, so that's my angry comment, and if you could fix that for me personally, that'd be great. Secondly,
for the record, I don't think anyone I talk to still works there, but sure, why
not? You're closer than I am. Okay, you have the translators ready. And my actual question is, I love the piece, and like, Shadow of the Colossus started as a super ambitious multiplayer game for the PS2.
Yeah,
PS2, right?
Yep.
Before it was completely reimagined as what it is today, and obviously you cover that. So like, I was so like enthralled by that, and so maybe you could share. Listeners are going to go read the piece, of course, but like share a little bit about that, what you learned about that.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, it's kind of like what Monster Hunter turned into, where like you would have groups of people kind of tracking down the monsters and then attacking them separately. I think the realization they came to was it was just going to be too much. Like they were already doing a bunch of stuff they hadn't done before, and having a bunch of tech that they hadn't dealt with. Like the PS2 didn't even really have that much online stuff going. Like there was stuff like SOCOM.
That's what I was wondering about. Yeah, if
it wasn't like a whole big system that was set up to work that way. So. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it was ever a realistic possibility of happening, but it's certainly fun to look at in retrospect. And it's cool that there's like footage of it, so you can kind of look back at what they were thinking.
Yeah, they did a lot of work, and they almost kind of made it happen. But then, like you said, they just kind of were like, whoa, this is way too much, and we gotta pivot here, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of a trend with all of these games, like all of the Team Ico or Fumito Ueda games, is they start pretty ambitious, and sometimes that works out great. Like the way they were able to kind of narrow down what Shadow of Colossus was into what it ended up being is fantastic, and it kind of worked kind of exactly as probably they wanted it to. Last Guardian ended up taking a lot longer because of that.
Yeah,
I don't know the story of their new game they're working on, the Project Robot, but it's certainly been in development 10 years, so wouldn't surprise me if it was something like that too. But who knows?
I gotta see if Last Guardian's on PC. I think it is. Maybe I gotta play that.
I don't
think
so.
Not. Maybe it's not. God, come on.
Why don't you get yourself a PlayStation?
No,
it's a good console.
I've been telling him this for years.
we've talked about it extensively. In 2025, there's barely a reason to do so because all of these games are coming to PC. So I have a very capable PC and I have a Switch to play The Legend of Zelda and Super Mario Brothers and like
except
couch
for
games
these
with my
games
kids.
we're having the conversation about that you could be playing.
It's
if you had one.
literally Shadow of the Colossus, Last Guardian. Can you name a single other? And Astrobot.
Is Astrobot?
Yeah. I would love to play Astrobot, but I could take it or leave it. You know what I mean? I'm not buying a PS5 to play 3 video games.
You said you had kids, right? That's like the perfect game for kids.
Astrobot? Yeah. But we're good with Fortnite and Mario Wonder.
Oh, God.
And Minecraft.
Fine. So, Matt, before I go on to anything else, anything else specific about Shadow that you wanted to ask?
Just, again, you cowards. Bring it to Steam. Now.
It wouldn't surprise me if they did at some point, but
I know it would be nice to be like, guess what? Yeah.
Yeah, usually it seems like they're doing that with their bigger stuff. And like, I actually don't know how well the remake sold, but it never struck me as like one of their biggest games. Maybe I'm wrong.
I was wondering that too. It looks great though. It looks like they did a good job, and and maybe it seemed to be faithful to the original. It just looks and runs better. Is that
some
accurate?
people will complain about certain things, like the performance. Yeah, it's great. But some people will complain about like, oh, the tone seems a little off, or like the lighting seems a little off and stuff like that. But like certainly from like a detail perspective, it's a huge step forward.
Yeah.
So.
Like they didn't change anything mechanically. They just
there's some tiny things in there, but nothing that is like if you haven't played the game, you wouldn't
know that. It's great for me. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. One day. All right, please proceed. I'm done complaining.
So, Matt, of the oral histories, does one stand out for you as being extremely rewarding to create? And if so, was there any reason why?
I mean, for me, Street Fighter is the one I spent the most time on. So that was both. So Street Fighter 2 was the one I did first, which is like a Polygon story that was a big thing that, it took a lot of time. It did a lot of good traffic. It was kind of like my first really big one of these kinds of things. And then later I came back to that, I don't know how many years, maybe like 5 years later, and I turned it into the big series where I did okay, let's look at all the other games surrounding Street Fighter 2, so like Street Fighter 1 and Alpha and 3 and Capcom vs. SNK and all these other games. And we turned all those into a book at the end. So that's definitely the one I've spent the most time on. Like between that first story and like the follow-up stuff, I probably spent like 3 or 4 years on that. Not exclusively, like I was doing other things too, but always hanging around in the background. And that was always like my favorite game growing up too. So I think that's the one that probably meant the most to me, and it's probably why I didn't want to let it go and just kept working on it for so long. But yeah, that was, I don't know. Definitely, I would say that's definitely the one that I spent the most time on.
Yeah. You mentioned the book. If people want to buy the book, can they still do that?
Yeah, there's different versions of it. So it's called Like a Hurricane. It was published by a British publisher called Read Only Memory that does really good game books. And you can still buy it on their website, which I don't know, just search Read Only Memory. I think it's like readonlymemory.com.
We have show notes, so we'll put we can add a link in.
Video description and show notes for sure.
There's also a US version of that, which the cover is not quite as nice in my opinion, but you can get that on Amazon or Barnes and Noble, places like that. And then also the Final Fantasy VII story I did is also available as a book, which is through all those same places in the same ways. And again, the US cover is not as good, but go to Read All Their Memories website. They ship internationally, and they are
great.
Awesome. I've never heard of them actually, so I'm gonna definitely check that out.
You gotta fix that. They have they did like a Sega arcade pop-up book where you flip open the pages and like little arcade cabinets pop up.
Oh wow!
They just announced just recently they're doing like a big like PlayStation 30th anniversary book with like all these like archival photos and things.
And really the books are so pretty. I had to open a tab.
Oh, she's looking now. Yeah.
I had to open a tab. Thank you. I'm going to pour over this later.
I'm realizing suddenly that you have done these oral history deep dives on the most important games of their genre. Street Fighter broke open and created the mold for the modern fighting game. Final Fantasy VII revolutionized what the JRPG could be and eventually became. Shadow of the Colossus, while not as big as those necessarily, is hugely influential in the Souls character action game. So obviously you are attracted to games that matter to you and that matter to the world culturally, but on purpose / by accident, you have chronicled arguably the most important video games ever made. Again, it's not a question, just like
that far.
A hat tip.
Way to put him on the spot, Matt.
No, it's never like I'm looking at a list and saying like, okay, I need to hit this genre or something like that.
No,
but it's very much like, okay, what is the like? So I guess the good way to look at that would be like, I'm doing Street Fighter 2, not Street Fighter the series, although it kind of is turning into that. But like it's the biggest kind of moment. Of that series. And Final Fantasy 7,
it is the moment for that.
Yeah,
genre,
you could argue it's a similar kind of thing with Final Fantasy, and Shadow of the Colossus, you could argue, is like the most successful of the Team Eco games. And but that's not really like the point. The point is more just like to find the interesting stories and like see where they fit, and then that just kind of happens to line up a lot of the times. I've done a lot of other more obscure stuff too. It just, I don't tend to spend quite as much time on it, or like so with the Street Fighter series, like I did a whole big thing on the Street Fighter, the movie, the game that came out that is kind of notoriously not thought of as being particularly good, but had a really interesting story. And I think that was one of the most interesting kind of parts of the Street Fighter project that I worked on, just because like there's all this like infighting with like the actors wanting more money and the developers not knowing how to make it, and the developers make it in the US, and the Capcom team in Japan not liking what they were doing, but not really having a control over them, and like all these different kind of sides to the story that are what kind of are one of the most interesting things about doing the oral histories, because you get to show kind of different perspectives on these things.
Yeah. And so Colette asked you about, what was the most rewarding or favorite, but then also we are wondering which of these was the hardest, in terms of access or, research. Was there one that was particularly challenging for you?
I mean, probably the hardest ones are the ones that never came out, just because I could never get certain people to talk and that kind of thing. But it's also like I think Street Fighter is probably the example I would go to there, just because like when you're already that deep in it, like anyone who doesn't want to talk is like painful, because like I got 90% of the way there. Why can't I just get this like last little bit? So yeah, there's certainly people like the guy who's the founder of Capcom. I would love to have talked to, but just wasn't able to. And and there are other people too. There's a lot of politics that come into some of this stuff. A lot of differences in how Japanese companies work versus US companies, and who they will let speak even like 20 years after the fact, and what. Like there was one example where I talked to some people at a Japanese company, and they're like, "You can interview us, but if you use anything from this, you have to say this other person said it, not the person who's actually saying it." And like, I didn't do that. I wouldn't go along with that. But like, that's just how they're used to working with stuff like that. And like,
Yep. I remember trying to work with some of them way back in the day when I did games writing, and I'll just leave it at that.
You get back like email Q&As that are all like attributed to the company, or you get back like,
right.
Said Capcom.
We skipped this answer because we didn't want to answer this one, and it's like, I don't know. I think I get that less these days, because I'm not really doing as much like current promotional stuff as you get. But the impression I get is that stuff is still kind of awkward out there. So yeah, they're not. It's a brick wall. That's what I always used to say. It was like talking to Nintendo. It's like a brick wall. It's like they're not letting you know anything. You're not getting any scoop or any. It's like no.
And this actually.
Well,
no, go ahead. I have another question on that.
I think Nintendo is interesting because like once they let you in, they let you all the way in. Like the few times they do open it up to, whether it's to like a magazine or more often than not a mainstream publication these days, but they'll give like a lot of access and give like really good answers and like really open about things.
You're answering the question I had. I'm worried that the old guard of Nintendo is going to pass away and take their stories with them because they're so secretive. Do you agree with that statement, or maybe you're saying that they are opening up more now?
No. I don't mean to say they're more opening up, or they're opening up more now. I mean to say that like they don't let people in very often, but when they do, they're really good about it. But but yeah, Nintendo is an interesting one too, because like, I don't know if you saw, there was a thing at the Portland Retro Gaming Expo just recently, where they got together some of like the people who worked on the US launch for the NES, and that was like a really good panel.
I didn't see that.
But so like, I think Nintendo now, well, historically has always been a secretive company. Certainly the US side, I think is opening up a little bit more. Like people used to work at the US side, especially. I mean, because they've realized enough time has passed, and it's just, you can't wait forever on this kind of stuff. The Japanese side, I imagine a lot of that stuff is just going to be taken to their graves. It's just kind of
it's just
works.
so sad.
There are a few people.
Such a bummer.
There's a few people who work there who have like come out and just decided to talk about stuff, and then like once they do, like everyone swarms to interview them. But like, yeah, the great majority of people, and it's not just Nintendo. Like, there's a lot of companies like that, but certainly they they have a message they want to get across, and people tend to follow that.
Right.
Yeah. So to bounce back to the oral histories for a moment, how do you feel people reacted to them? Obviously I'm sure they liked them, but do you feel like people really reacted and responded positively to the amount of detail and research that you had put into these works?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways I'm kind of cheating, because it's like, it's not really about my writing or talent or anything like that. It's just about how much effort and time we put into it so that we can kind of present people a good product. Like if I spend 100 hours tracking down good quotes, then like I can kind of guarantee people are going to like that, because I know the quotes will be good because I put the time in. So in some ways it's kind of playing it safe in that way of like knowing, there's a good chance people will like this if you put the time in. But yeah, I mean, certainly it is rewarding too, because I like working on like bigger things, and kind of it's fun putting together all the pieces too. It's not just like the interviews, but like working with illustrators and designers and all that kind of stuff to kind of create these packages can be really fun. And I think that's the part of it that I've really enjoyed, especially over the last like maybe 10 years or so, is just kind of what are the ways to kind of make these stories into like bigger packages rather than just like, articles.
Yeah. Well, and may I venture as well that even though you're right, the quotes are great and the sources are great, that if you weren't the storyteller that was assembling them in the way that you were, that people would not get to have the experience that they're having consuming them. So I think that, your role is maybe bigger than you think.
Okay.
You're like, fine.
He cautiously approves that.
I went modest on the last question, and you tried to pull me back in.
Yeah, that's what we do here.
Yeah.
All right, so go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, well, I was just gonna bring up a design room, but before I move to that, Matt,
no, that's
please.
it. No, that's it. Just the transition, and so we apologize if it's a sore subject, but like obviously Polygon had a round of layoffs, and so I don't know if you were caught in that or if you departed on your own volition. Yeah.
No, I was laid off. Yes.
Okay.
About 6 months ago.
Yeah. So tell us, we understand the editorial ethos of Design Room, of course, but the Shadow of the Colossus piece is out there for everyone. It's public. It's not paywalled. But what is the plan? What is your plan for Design Room in terms of running a sustainable business for yourself here?
Yeah. So the basic plan is to run big oral histories that are free, and then to run kind of bonus stories around them that are essentially paid. There's subscriptions, different options you can subscribe to get that stuff. Sometimes you can get it if you pay more, you can get it early. If you pay the normal amount, you can get it kind of right when it goes out for everybody else. And yeah, I think the general plan is just to keep doing that. Just keep doing stories. I think I'm playing around a lot right now with how big to make every story, because there's always that question of if every story takes months, would people want to subscribe to a site that only posts something twice a year, even those are like big stories? Probably not. Right. There may be a small group of people that really like seeing giant stories, and I like working on those, and I'm going to try to do those as much as I can, but I'm trying to balance those with doing smaller stuff in between. So essentially the second project that we're doing on the website, which is what we're in the middle of right now, is this kind of series on music games. We posted a story on Res Infinite earlier this week, and there'll be some other stories coming soon. And so, the second kind of big package after the Shadow Colossus package is this thing on different music games. And none of those stories individually are as big as the Shadow Colossus one, but altogether, I think they'd be pretty pretty substantial. And then, after that, we have a bunch of other big kind of more similar to Shadow in that they're like, single game stories that are all kind of just being done. Some of those being done by freelancers. I'm working with a bunch of freelancers on different stories too, to kind of like piggyback so that we can kind of create more of a regular flow of these things. But it's hard because like I'm constantly torn between like wanting to make every story like the best possible version, and also wanting to have a good balance of stuff that can keep going up on the site. So that's what I'm working on now and trying to balance. The business side of it, I mean, I think we had a really good start. The Shadow Colossus story in particular did very well. It got very similar traffic to the kind of traffic that would have got Polygon.
Wow, that's great.
Well, but I don't think all the other stories are going to. Like some of the other ones that we've run since then have not. And, I think it's just going to be kind of hit or miss depending on the story and how it gets out there. So,
but my curiosity around the business, is about like, okay, so eyeballs are on the big story that is free, but is that translating to subscriptions? And to your point, like, what do people want from a subscription? Are they willing to wait for their subscription goodies? And not to get too far in the weeds, but like, is it Patreon or is it like a thing on your site that's a direct contribution?
No, it's direct. It's not through Patreon. I'm playing around with all that. I don't know the answers. I think for me personally, like right now, if anyone signs up, whether it's free or paid, that's good. Like I'm just trying to kind of build a subscriber base for the newsletter and for just kind of, get the word out. So that's kind of the main goal right now is just to get people signing up. Obviously, those who choose to pay, it's extremely helpful. I don't know if this will ever be a full-time thing. It is certainly not anywhere close to that right now. It is a fun thing that I'm doing that I want to keep doing, and hopefully I'll get enough to keep doing it. But I don't know exactly where that's going to end up. So I think at about 6 months in, I'm going to kind of like, sit down and look at all the numbers and say like, okay, how much can I continue to invest in this, and how much time can I spend on this, and do I need a part-time job while I'm doing this, or exactly how that's all going to fit together is certainly kind of up in the air. And I want to do it, so hopefully it'll work out. But there's a lot of question marks right now.
Well, that's understandable. And also I think, and we talked about this with Luke too, that you are breaking kind of more new ground in a space that to me is what the video game journalism space will look like in the future. And that this is a very new space that I think Matt and myself, for instance, as longtime readers, I think we care a lot about where that space is going, and also that work like yours does continue to get seen and get read because, like we're having this conversation, right? Like, we'll talk about news some weeks, and I'll often say to him, I haven't even looked at game news this week. And the reason I haven't is because I don't give a shit about it anymore because it's so rarely actually good and engaging.
Right.
And I want to read, whether it is a big, beautiful oral history like what you're doing, or whether it is like a really great interview with like an indie developer of a game that I just found out about and that is so different and so standout. Like I want to read that stuff, but in a world where, SEO and game guides are driving everything, there's just not the room, right? There's not the same kind of room. And so I believe that the room is going to have to be made by projects like yours, projects like Luke's. But I really, I don't want to speak for both of us, but I think that Matt too really cares about those projects and that they're really important. So that's one of the reasons why we wanted to talk to you.
Yeah, fully co-sign.
I hope so. I don't necessarily see it as the only future. I think there's lots of ways you can fund things. I think, some people have very good sponsorship deals through things like YouTube and things like that. That's not really the direction I wanted to go in with this. But there's ways of doing things that you can get them paid for. Some people have like corporate backers and that kind of thing. I don't know. I think the idea with this for me was very much like, I just wanted to do exactly what I wanted to do and not worry about that kind of stuff. And I think it's maybe less likely that it will be a huge financial success because of that. But I'm much more focused on kind of doing the things I want to do right now. There's a lot of stuff that like I've had in my mind for a while that's like I just kind of want to get out of my system. So a lot of it is just that, and hopefully I can continue to do that for a long time. But even if it only lasts like a year or something like that, like I think I'll still be happy with it, and that's kind of the main goal. So
yeah, the most important goal, I think.
One related question before we kind of wrap up, or if there's other things we want to cover, but I am of the observation, I could be wrong, that internet audiences are more likely to pay for videos and audio podcasts than they are for text on a page, which is a bummer in a lot of ways. But I think it is the nature of humans, and it is the nature of the internet that we live in, where it's like, oh, this guy makes me laugh or think on YouTube, so I want to throw him a buck on Patreon. But articles are everywhere and they're all free, so why would I pay for an article? And I'm not saying that's good, but my question is like, have you considered turning these oral histories or expanding them into audio or video form? Because you are sitting down with people as we are now over the internet and recording their voices and then transcribing. So like you have audio recordings of these very important people. You know what I mean? Is that a thing?
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. I think it's that kind of like parasocial relationship people talk about. Like,
yes, there you go.
I think it's less that people are paying for the specific content in a lot of cases, and more just paying because they want to support a specific person. And
it's harder to see that person when it's text. That's my theory.
And I could see this. Yeah, I could see this even in the old days. Like if you look at like anytime, I was never big about kind of getting my name out there or like building a brand or all this kind of stuff that people talk about. Like I probably was dumb in that I had a lot of opportunities to do it, working at sites like OneUp that had a bunch of podcasts and Polygon that had some various video things over the years. Like if I really was focused on like my career and building that part of it up, I probably did it the completely wrong way, because I was much more kind of in the background, just kind of doing a different kind of story that I enjoyed doing, but was certainly not, building my name up in that way. So I think that just kind of makes sense the way it all works out. And I think I may try to do something like what you're talking about. It is hard because I think part of the reason that I can make the text stories work well is because not every interview is done the same way. Like there are some that are done in person. There are some that are done over video chats. There are some that are done like right now and then something will come through email, which I don't really prefer to do, but it can happen occasionally. And so like, I think the advantage of a text story is you can piece all that stuff together and people don't really notice in the same way. Whereas with video, it would be very noticeable. But I have thought of this. I definitely do not have anything planned in the short term. But yeah, I don't know. I would like to do it. I think it's also not necessarily my biggest skill set at the moment. I can do some of that stuff, but maybe not at the level that I would be happy with at the moment. Yeah. So, I don't know. It's something to consider, but right now, certainly I'm more than busy enough with just kind of getting all the tech stuff together and trying to create like more of a flow of those stories coming in consistently. And like, it's funny because like I'll be working on a story that's not going to run for like 4 months. And I'll be like, okay, we got to do this part now, cause this person may not be available if you wait and that kind of stuff. So I'm juggling all that stuff. And that certainly takes up most of my time right now. But I'd love to do something like what you're talking about at some point, but I don't know. It's hard to say.
I always say it's 10x the work. And just to kind of piggyback on what you're saying of like, you have all this audio and email and blah, blah, and it's none of it's easy, but it is simple for you to say, blah, 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 said person X and put that into text. But to turn that into an audio visual thing, it's like this audio and who can hear this and this person speaking in Japanese and who's saying what. And it's like, it is just so much more work to make it presentable. And so I get it.
Yeah. And especially when you're dealing with translated stuff too, I think that doesn't really work very well on video or audio, because like you either have someone who's dubbing over it or you have to read subtitles. And if like you're reading subtitles, then it's like, is that really the best way of getting the information? Right. So I don't know. nothing against subtitles, but generally, if I'm like just trying to like find out information, I would probably prefer to read that at whatever speed I want to read at instead of just waiting to
All right,
read.
here's what we do. We do it Ken Burns style, where it's just a picture of a video game office, and then Tom Hanks comes in and he's like, "Dear Claudia, it's been 7 years since the war," and that's how we go.
Yes,
Colette's having
with
a coughing
that budget. Yes.
Yes.
Sounds fun.
All right, let's do it.
So one quick question before we wrap up, and I just want to make sure that I know there's some things, Matt, that you probably want to keep as a surprise, but is there anything that you do want to tease or tell people to expect coming forward from Design Room, like in the next few months?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure. So like the music package that we're doing now is going to have some other stories coming. Like we have one on the guy who created Electroplankton, and there was another game he worked on called Sound Fantasy before that.
Cool.
I don't know any of these. Colette, do you know these games?
I do. Yeah, I know.
Okay, you would. Yeah.
So he there's a like a science and technology museum in San Francisco called the Exploratorium that he had worked. He had not worked necessarily. Like he had done like an installation there like 30 years ago, and I kind of stumbled onto his name through that, and then I realized like, oh, we could talk to him for his other story. So it was kind of a fun little connection for me there. Although I'm actually not writing that story. We have a freelancer working at it, and it'll be up pretty soon. After that, yeah, there's a couple other music game things. I'm not sure I should mention those because there's like a tiny chance that those might not happen.
Right.
Even though they're pretty close. So I generally don't like to mention things until like I've actually done the interviews and like all the work is on me.
Of course.
And, like, the off chance that somebody falls through. But yeah, like we have like I'm looking at a list right next to your window right here, and like there are 1, 2, 5 like big like kind of Shadow of the Colossus sized stories planned at the moment.
Yay!
And I mean, some people will like there are some obscure ones and there are some more mainstream ones. So I don't know. Everyone will probably have their own takes on them. But it's also one of those things where like most of those are only half finished at this point. So you never know exactly which ones are going to come together all that like in the best way and which ones are not. I have a lot of hopes for most of them, but it's hard to say exactly. And that's what kind of keeps it interesting.
Totally get it. I figured, obviously some of them have to stay under wraps. So people can sign up at Design Room and get updates and subscribe. And that's how they'll know when new stuff comes out.
There you go.
Yeah. And it's like I say, it's not really like I'm trying to keep it secret as much as just like I want to make sure it's like 100% before I say it.
Absolutely. We've hacked into your computer through this chat window, and we'll put it in the show notes. We'll get that list somehow.
You're going to be very confused by some of these documents.
All right, folks. We have to let Matt go. Go to Design Room, check out the Shadow of the Colossus piece, and see if there is a subscription tier that is right for you. Matt Leone, thank you for joining us, and best of luck. We are excited to follow your work.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Mm-hmm.
Listeners, please remember to be kind and rewind your podcasts after listening, and we will talk with you in 1 week's time.